Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be my March TBR. Now for the month of March, I have quite the selection of books I want to read. This year so far, my reading has definitely been up and down. I've read some fantastic books, some amazing new releases, and also some books that have sort of fallen flat for me. So I'm really focusing for the month of March to pick up books that I feel like I'm really going to love. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. First, a word from this video's sponsor, which is GlassesUSA.com. I'm so excited to be partnering up with GlassesUSA.com for this video because I have been working with them for many years, and every single pair of my glasses is from this site. I am truly a huge fan. But if you're not familiar, GlassesUSA.com is an online glasses retailer, and through their site, you're able to shop a huge variety and selection of glasses, sunglasses, and even contacts, which are all sent directly to your door, which we love to see. Because they are an online retailer, they're able to cut out the middleman, meaning you're able to find fantastic deals and prices on their site. And they also have super handy tools like the AR try-on tool, which allows you to see what the glasses look like on your face before you purchase them. Basically, you can handle all of your glasses needs from the comfort of your own couch and home. I, of course, have a very exciting new pair of frames to show off. Before I do that, I, of course, want to shout out that I have a very exclusive and special offer with GlassesUSA.com. If you click the link down below, you'll not only be able to find all of the glasses I'm both wearing and showing off today, but also you'll be able to layer a special coupon on top of any deal they're currently running on site, which is amazing. First and foremost, I do have to give a quick shout out to my everyday pair of glasses, which are the Ray-Ban RX 3447V round in the color gold. I love these frames so much. I literally wear them basically every single day. But my new frames, they are called the Greek, and you might be able to notice that these might actually be the perfect shade of sage green, and they actually perfectly match my kitchen, which is very exciting for me personally and just in general. I love this color so much. I also think it goes really nicely with my hair. And these are also part of the Save the Tortoise collection, where a portion of all the profits made from this collection are donated to the American Tortoise Rescue Foundation, which is amazing too. But yes, these are my new frames, which of course will be linked down below, as well as my classic frames I wear every single day, as well as my special and very exclusive offer code. But thank you so much to GlassesUSA.com for sponsoring this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. The first book that's on my list is The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. This is the second standalone novel within the Joe Abercrombie universe. And I have a goal this year to not only complete all of the standalone novels, but also start the second trilogy within his universe, which is the Age of Madness series. This standalone novel in particular sounds really interesting. And I also appreciate that because these are, individual events being expressed in one book, you can kind of have an unusual assortment of characters and kind of focus in on one particular event, which is definitely what appears to be going on in this book. But obviously all of his novels are very grimdark, housing characters with questionable morals that you somehow still really enjoy and root for. But this story follows a variety of characters all coming together to fight in one singular battle. They all have different backstories, they all have different allegiances, they all have different reasons for fighting, but they're all working towards the same bloody day, if you will. And I just feel like that concept sounds so interesting to me, and I'm sure will create quite a bit of confusion in my own heart in terms of who even to root for, because we're following people I believe on all sides. But yeah, the back says 3 men, 1 battle, no heroes. An action-packed novel full of brutality, black humor, and razor-sharp characters, which is exactly what I would expect from Joe Abercrombie. Next book that's on my TBR is The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. I read The Spear Cuts Through Water last year, immediately became one of my favorite fantasy books of all time. Obviously, I knew I immediately wanted to check out his debut novel, which is actually a sci-fi story. But in this book, we're introduced to our main character, Nia, who at the beginning of the story is struggling. She has a job where she basically travels through space, but as a result of this and her, time in space travel, she's basically surpassed the lifespans of likely everyone who was previously present in her life. Because of this, she really only has her work, which she throws herself into, but she's also feeling alone and adrift, until one day she stumbles upon an unlikely thing, which is a young boy floating in space space, who she quickly takes in. The only thing he has in his possession is an old wooden flute, which he uses to communicate. From there, I believe a sort of found family situation begins to form, and these two individuals continue to travel through space and time together. This story, I imagine, is going to be not only beautifully written, as I would expect from Simon Jimenez, but I just feel like it's going to be emotional and thoughtful and full of so many different inputs. I truly feel like I'm going to love so much. I have a feeling this could be one of my favorite books of the year, so I'm really looking forward to getting to it this month. I also feel like it might make me cry, but that's okay. Next up, I have a variety of like next book in series. In fact, actually a couple final books in series I hope to get to as well. The first is Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I reread Gideon the Ninth for the third time in January and finally read Harrow the Ninth that same month as well, and loved both of them so much. Truly obsessed with the characters, this world, and just the unique way that this author writes their plots. They're so intriguing, full of humor and so much heart, and the combination of sci-fi and fantasy works so well. However, though, this is definitely a series that I will forget so many things if I let too much time elapse between books. They're very detailed and told in a very specific fashion. So with that in mind, I definitely want to get to Nona the Ninth as soon as possible, because it's already been a month since I read Harrow the Ninth, and I just can't let any more information fall out of my head. Each book in this series does sort of center a new main character we follow, but basically it's set in a sci-fi world where necromancy exists, and there's these different planets that house different houses that have their own specialty in necromancy. In book one, we're introduced to our main character Gideon, and she lives on a planet called Ninth House, and she has been trying to escape Ninth House her entire life to no avail. However, at the beginning of the book, she makes a deal with Harrow, and they begin to work together because Harrow was invited to take place in this competition to become a lector on First House, which could really bring a lot of opportunity and resources to Ninth House, which desperately needs it. They travel there, they begin this competition, they meet a bunch of people from all the other houses, but it quickly devolves in like a murder mystery survival story. Each book so far that I've read in this series, which granted is only the first two, very much have their own style and quality to it, not only from the narrator, but also just kind of like the overall vibe, and it's very, very effective. So I imagine Nona the Ninth is going to have its own distinct vibe to it as well, and I can't wait to read it and see what in the world is going to happen next in the series, because if there's one thing that's consistent so far is that I can never guess any single thing that's about to happen. Everything is so unexpected, and I just really appreciate the ride of these books so much. Next up, I have The Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. I've started this book in the month of January. I want to say I read about 100 pages of this and then put it down because I just don't want it to end, which I know I've mentioned quite a bit on my channel. That being said, though, I definitely want to make significant headway on this book in the month of March. I don't necessarily need to finish it. It is an incredibly long book, almost 900 pages long, but I do want to make good progress and kind of work to finish it in the month of April. It's just time. I need to complete this, and if I'm having really terrible withdrawals, you know what? I can just reread The Assassin's Apprentice in May or something and just start the whole cycle over again. But I'm really looking forward to see how everything is going to wrap up. I'm on the edge of my seat. This final trilogy following The Fitz and the Fool once again has been both really methodically paced and giving us lots of intimate home moments, but also quite perilous in its speed at other times. Like the stopping and starting have just made this series so hard to put down once you kind of pick it up. I love the characters so much. I love being in Fitz's head, despite the fact that he's a very moody and emotional man. I love that about him. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see the concluding plot arcs of this trilogy. It's gonna be a time. Next up, I have Ancillary Mercy by Anne Leckie, and this is the third and final book to the Imperial Radich series. I'm not quite sure how to say that, but what I can say is that I've loved this trilogy oh so much. I read the first book at the end of last year, read the second book in February, so I'm just trying to keep that momentum going and wrap up this trilogy once and for all. I have loved following Breck, who is our main character, who we're introduced to in book one. He was once known as the Justice of Torin, basically living as the AI in a spaceship for thousands and thousands of years. And living as a spaceship, she also existed as individuals called Ancillaries, which were like 20 bodies, which were all connected through their consciousness. Essentially, our main character for thousands of years lived through the experience of collective consciousness until one day something happened, and now they're a solo individual, and we find them as they're kind of like trying trying to get their revenge. We'll also see them as they grow close to different characters and kind of get comrades along the way, get wrapped up in a very, very complex conspiracy. Again, I truly love book 1 so much. I really enjoyed book 2 as well, and I'm really looking forward to see how the entire trilogy is going to wrap up in book 3. I also know there are other books set in this world, and I just really enjoy Enlecky's writing. She includes not only really fantastic sci-fi plots, but also has really interesting perspectives on language and gender as it relates to the societies in this series. I will be reading this soon. Last book that I'm reading in a series I've already started is A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. I am just so delighted by this trilogy by Stephanie Garber so much. A YA fantasy series that very much reads like a fairy tale. It's just so sweet, so endearing. I love the main character, Evangeline, so much. It's kind of lower stakes, but in a way that I personally really enjoy. But don't get me wrong, the plot reads very, very quick, and there's definitely like serious stuff going on, but it just has this like very charming quality to it. But in this series, we're introduced to our main character, Evangeline Fox, and at the beginning of book 1, she has had her heart broken, and she will do anything to reclaim her lost love. So she turns to the Fate of Broken Hearts, or the Prince of Broken Hearts, who's kind of like a god in this world, and in exchange for 3 kisses of his choosing, he's gonna help her. But obviously everything sort of gets turned upside down from there. Not only is Evangeline Fox almost overnight becoming one of the most eligible single ladies in the town, she's thrown headfirst in like a competition to win the hand of a prince, but also finds herself at the center of various prophecies, and the very meddling Prince of Broken Hearts seemingly is always right around the corner to get involved in her life. This book has like such a perfect mix of magic and fun characters. It's funny and lovable, and Evangeline Fox is just like a really charming girl who I'm rooting for deeply. It's like very much a coming of age story. I'm just, again, just charmed by the whole thing. I really enjoyed the first 2 books in this series, and I'm excited to see how the whole thing is going to wrap up. So I'm gonna read the 3rd book as well. Next book that's on my list is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wang. This author is also known for writing The Sword of Kaigen, which is one of my favorite fantasy standalones of all time, and I've heard nothing but fantastic things about this newer release. This book I also believe is a standalone, and it's set in the fictional magical city of Tehran, and here magic has become an industrial utopia. In this story, we follow our main character Skonia, who has always felt she has had more to prove than any other student. An orphan since the age of 4, she's worked tirelessly for the last 20 years with one specific goal in mind, and that is to do the impossible and get entered into the High Ministry of Magic and become the first woman to do so. She finally achieves this honor, and she feels like all of the obstacles of her life are behind her, but she quickly realizes that all of her colleagues very much do not want her to be there and are constantly sabotaging her left and right. And one of their sabotages, if you will, is assigning a janitor to be her research assistant, but turns out this janitor has a past of their own, and they begin to form an unlikely relationship, and I think they sort of turn everything upside down within this ministry, and I am so curious about this. I already know I love this author's writing so much. They have such a skill with fitting such great world building, character development, emotional development, and not like a lot of space. This is obviously not a short book, but like I'm so looking forward to jumping into this. I also feel like it's going to be a bittersweet experience because The Sword of Kaigen almost broke me, but I can't wait to read this. Next up, I have 2 literary fiction books, which I hope to read this month. The first is Belcanto by Anne Patchett. I'm hoping to read quite a few Anne Patchett books this year. I now officially own quite a few of her books on my shelf, and I've truly only heard great things about them. I've decided to start with Belcanto because honestly, the synopsis just sounds so interesting, but also unusual to me. But basically, the setup and synopsis of this is that somewhere in South America, a very lavish party is being taken place. And then suddenly the entire party is taken hostage by another group of individuals. But this story is not one of like an intense sort of standoff and like trying to save the day, a hero story, if you will, but instead it documents the unlikely bonds that form between the partygoers and the hostage takers. I've heard such amazing things about this. Anne Patchett, apparently, because I haven't read a book of hers yet, has such a way with creating characters and relationships and just like a really emotional and thoughtful story experience. So I decided to start here. It just sounded like such an interesting jumping off point. So I will be reading this. Speaking of an interesting jumping off point, I also have Y-N, or Your Name by Esther Yi. This is supposed to be a very dark and interesting take on obsession. And in particular, we follow our main character, who is an unnamed main character, kind of calling to the your name element of this book, kind of like fan fiction, insert yourself within this story. They feel that their life begun the day that Moon appeared within it. Moon is an idol that they are very much into. They're a part of a group that they're very much into, but basically Moon is by far and away their favorite member, until one day Moon seemingly is no longer appearing in the typical appearances they would expect with this group, and they decide that they're going to travel from their home, which is in Europe, to South Korea to try to save Moon from what clearly appears to them to be a very tragic situation. This is supposed to document obsession and also parasocial relationships and kind of really devolve in a very dark place. Again, I also think the author is playing with perspective here, allowing us, the reader, to insert ourselves within this story as well. It sounds really interesting, really thought-provoking, and it's also not too long, so I also feel like I'll be able to read it really quickly, and I've just been so curious about it ever since I added it to my shelf. And the last book that's on my March TBR is the Desaad Heir, and I'm so looking forward to picking this book up. I have been craving a romantasy since the beginning of this year, but transparently, I feel like I've sort of been let down by the ones I've picked up. But based on some of the reviews of this, I feel like I could personally really enjoy this romantasy, because a lot of people say this is actually slow burn. Like, some of the reviews that didn't enjoy this book made me more excited for it, because people said, oh, it's slow, the pacing is slow. And I feel like my number one problem I tend to run into with romantasy is that I feel like I want things to be drawn out more. So I'm really hoping that this book will be like my new obsession. It also is like a true enemies to lovers story. This book is set in a fantasy world where 10 years prior to the start of the novel, the previous kingdom named Desaad burned down, and it was thought that every member of the royal family also was killed off except one did not, our main character. Her name is Sylvia, and since the destruction of her family and her kingdom, she has obviously been laying low, hiding in plain sight, and obviously trying to avoid detection of the new in charge, like, family of the land that she's living in, until one day she's basically caught by the prince of the realm and begin to work with one another in a very unlikely fashion. From there, it is said, a deadly game begins, where Sylvia can't let Aaron discover her identity, and as hatred shifts into something more between the heirs, and as the tides change around her, Sylvia will have to choose between the life she wants and the one she abandoned. This just sounds so intense, and again, true enemies to lovers, and I'm just begging for a slow burn situation, but only one way to find out. Alrighty guys, those are the books I hope to read in the month of March. Please let me know down below some books you're hoping to get to this month, as I would love to know, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!